If your ambition exceeds your talent, good. Because it is only through ambition that talent grows. Never curse life for being hard, or blame people for your downfalls, or pray that life was easier. Instead, wish that you were better, stronger, more skilled. Never hold back greatness in spite of approval from others. When there is no approval, when there is no hope or support, that's when you need to thrive and go for it all. Anyone with vision too big for the average mind is always deemed as insane until they can pull the vision off, and then you're called something else. And this is why ideas that are meant to be part of the few can never be part of the many. They will stand alone, rejected by the multitude, until they're not. The biggest tragedy in life is a waste of talent led by somebody who sacrificed their ideas to become one of the many, never knowing if their idea was meant to become the next. We are here to revisit what these plastic boats can be capable of because of the recent success that we've had in an earlier, much simpler conversion. Now we're going to max it out as much as we possibly can because it's a possibility that this boat right now could do what no other boat its size can. In watching this video, if you have a similar project you would like to take on, we have a website that specializes in things just like this. Build kits, boat parts, accessories, you name it. We have it, including a bunch of custom parts that are made right here in the US. In fact, the kit that is used to build this boat is actually on our website right here. Search Pond Monster Kit and choose which selection you'd like. Alright, so what do we truly have? We have a 10-foot boat, but really only 9 feet once you actually see the usable deck space that we can add on to it. It's held together with staples and a questionable seam that has gaps everywhere. Likely why we found water in it and it's never actually hit in the lake. So one of the best and earliest things you can do to this is just take off that seam and seal that entire edge, and that will solve your waterlogged foam saturation problems almost immediately, I would imagine. But I think the pontoons themselves can become something else other than just a big giant void of foam. I think we can actually make very good usable storage. I mean, the boat is small, but it's completely straight with no taper, and that does make a really good foundation for a rod locker. So the little bit of foam we left are right in the crevices because the pontoons slightly are wider on the bottom than the actual top. So there's just that small layer there, and that's the only part we left in. Everything else we gutted, and we put one layer of pink foam on the bottom and then framed aluminum around the edges and into the lockers themselves. I will also say that doing this, there's no turning back. You substantially compromise the reserve buoyancy in your boat, and it's now incredibly unsafe. That doesn't matter to me, but I mean, if it matters to you, just know that you probably shouldn't do this. Also, the sidewalls there, just before I forget, I had to use flat bar, 1/8 inch flat bar instead of tubing or angle, which we would normally use for under supports from the deck to like the subfloor. So there's two mini subfloors now, and they're supported by 1/8 inch flat bar with like 10 inches to 12 inches apart, and then we're going to end up putting sheet metal in there. There's just enough room down the bottom that we ran, I think, 1.5 inch conduit with elbow bends. We got rid of those aren't the right ones, but we got legitimate elbow bends through the conduit piping, and we have 2 conduits running from the front to the back, which will substantially help in wire later. You can also run a complete wood deck over this, and that would have been a much easier way, but I wanted to make it complicated and add a bunch of hatches, and then I thought I could get away with it with minimal terminal panels from aluminum, and so the entire frame is aluminum. That was all fine and dandy until I realized I should have done a subfloor first. I remember in the last Pond Prowler, it squeaked everywhere because I did the subfloor last and it wasn't very well in there. So I had to figure something out for that because we're really too far into this. But just knowing if you get the kit, do the subfloor first, drop it in. I mean, you can do the rod lockers first, then drop in the subfloor, and then only have like minimal cross beams for the top frame just to tie everything in so it doesn't shift. I also chose to complicate this more by adding a pedestal mount and then adding a Minn Kota edge in the front when I should have just got a Minn Kota Endura and flipped the head around like everybody else does smartly. Nope, I have to have a scissor mount because I don't know. Well, it's too late. I bought one and I have this idea in my head, and so I don't have a good idea of how to do the front at all. I just know that I want the edge there. So I'll have to make something after I figure out some of the other problems. Like a solution for the front caps. For the original Pond Prowler 8 build, I even had to weld meagerly with a spool gun these front caps because there's just no good solution when it starts to taper down and do its little aesthetic thing in the plastic mold. Also, the subfloor was a huge problem because I did the subfloor last, and like I said earlier, it tweaked and bent and you could flex it, and it worked, but man, it was terrible. So I need to make something that's more solid and is not going to shift down there and is going to tie into the frame and solidify the boat more. Pretty much infusing aluminum with plastic. I don't know how well it's going to go. There's a few times in this whole build that every time I riveted through the plastic into the aluminum to pull it tight, that the entire frame would shift and it wouldn't be right. I squared it and squared it again. I remeasured 3-4 times and it would still shift. And so that was a big complicated problem with it. Eventually I got around the subfloor problem by just welding stuff in. So I completely cheated here because I had the resource to do it. But if you're gonna just do this again, just make the subfloor, make it solid, rivet it all together, then drop it in after you've made your rod lockers. And then tie top frames, like have minimal braces going across, nothing terribly fastened too much. And then, I mean, from the back and the front, then you can start tying stuff in to the middle, start tying your middle core hatches in. And once you've riveted all the aluminum to the plastic, it shouldn't shift anymore once you've got a solid base. And it does not need a pedestal mount. I put one there, it doesn't need it. I mean, later on when I actually tried it on the water, I was like, why did I put this thing in? And since I added the edge with a ginormously bulky foot pedal, I had to have a recessed foot pedal tray. The one that actually fit the best was our shorty, which is only a 2-inch drop versus a 4-inch drop. So it takes just the edge off of a scissor mount, kind of cable driven, you know, those ridiculous foot pedals. It doesn't take the whole thing flush like a 4-incher would, which is good because a 4-incher won't fit in here well. Because look at the boat, it got like no space. And these hatches that we use are ultralight hatches, meaning that the hatch itself is 1/16 inch thick, just like the rest of our framing. So they're a little bit lighter than our standard hatches, but not a whole lot lighter. And we only offer them in certain sizes. They work really well in small boats like this if you're really worried about the weight capacity because you have not a whole lot of displacement because your boat's small. They work well. But now that I've framed most of this out and I kind of have an idea of where things need to go, I need to find a place to put that edge. Now, the end caps that we used on the Prowler 8 will not work. For this one, we're going to have to make like an elevated rise lip. I had to make some sort of trolling motor mount anyway, so I figured I'd try to tie it all in. This is actually getting really complicated. It's making me start to regret that I didn't like do my initial route, where the initial route was just wood, that I routed 1/8 inch down and dropped those hatches in and then sealed the gaps with epoxy, then sealed the entire deck with epoxy, and then I just EVA foamed right over it, and all of it was completely straight with no problems. I even put a pedestal mount in there with under supports. So why am I doing all this? Hopefully the frame will be just as heavy, if not lighter than that, but also just a lot stronger because there was a little bit of flex with the wood. If you don't care about that, I would totally just go with wood, but it drove me insane, making all the noise. Like, stealth is the whole reason I'm building this boat. While making the trolling motor mount area there to the left, which I just stitched together a bunch of leftover tubing, I started getting the idea that if I made a raised lip, that it would at least hold the rod ends. I would lose less tackle and less rods over the side because the deck is completely flat, like it's skiff style, right on top of the boat. And that has bothered me a lot that there's no edge. So at least have a front with a raised edge area. Then I kind of was like, well, let's twist aluminum. I slotted it and bended it and tacked it together. Then I welded it all over and melted it together. Then I thought that looked pretty cool, but what if I added an even thicker gunnel lip? So then I did that, and then I did more of it. And then since I did one side that way, I had to do the other side to kind of match. And then I thought, well, I don't know, at least it's gonna look cool. But it terribly complicated the area. In the end, if I could do it all over again to simplify the design, I would just add T-tracks. I mean, on each side, up and down, and in the front. And I could have just mounted my own rail system there, and I wouldn't have had to do any of this. I also welded a lot more than I wanted to. At first, it was just to fix mess-ups that I couldn't foresee going through the design because it got inherently, more complicated. But then I started welding everywhere, and I found out that you can just weld right inside this plastic boat, and the plastic actually takes the heat really well, like very well. Couldn't believe it. So then I kind of just abused it and did more of it. It was awesome. If you made it this far into the video, you've realized there's a bunch of different camera angles going all over the place, zooming back and forth. I only did that with one camera, and it is this camera, the Insta360 X3. In fact, any of their cameras, from the 1X2 all the way to the 1RS, and this one, their latest version, is the most capable and advanced, will just get angles that you would really need an additional camera person to do. I'm just standalone. I do all my videos and edit everything by myself, and it's actually really hard to be a standalone filmmaker unless you have stuff that will enable you to do it correctly so you can compete with film crews. With this camera, even with multiple cameras, I am a film crew, so you should check it out. Okay, so I know the front was overkill, but later on it added to benefits throughout the build that I later really appreciated in terms of it enabling me to do some things. We'll show you that throughout the build. But there's parts of this build that I feel won't come out as good as it could unless other parts of the boat are done. So we're gonna move from all the way in the front, all the way to the back. And we're going to make an anchor system. Normally we would use Roy's shallow water anchors. In fact, we just put out a version 2 of these that are all aluminum. All anchors that you order from us that'll fit any standard transom will now be all aluminum, but this one has no transom. So I had to make my own anchors anyways. I had to make my own chassis that would fit. Since I started making that, then I figured, well, why not make one that actually folds down so it's actually storable? Because the chief complaint about these anchors is, well, you hit them on your garage. And for this thing's supposed to fit in a toy hauler. It's supposed to be my little toy hauler warrior boat thing. So there it is on the chassis. They're bent to flare out to have longer grabbing space out that way. But the actuating system is something I always kind of struggled with personally with Roy's. It's very nice for what it is, but I think that a pin system that is spring actuated, and that it won't accidentally activate while flying down the lake, is going to be the better version. So after I kind of add my little cosmetic stuff here with the perforated aluminum and add some brackets in here with 3/16, and I had that random scrap piece of metal that somebody donated, I go ahead and I just weld this on here to the plastic. This is like my chassis. It's not really a transom. It's not really a jack plate. It's the thingamabob that holds my anchors on, and also the motor, which is attached to the chassis for the anchor, which attaches to the grab bar, which attaches pretty much all on that little flimsy plastic block back there. That's not probably gonna fly. We're gonna have to frame and solidify the back end the farther we go down, so that'll have to come. But right now we're just gonna go ahead and put this together and worry about that later. I know this breaks several engineering rules. You guys all make schematics and plans. You have a meeting about it. It takes forever to actually get anything done into fruition because it has to get approved. But I have this other method that artists use. It's called F around and find out, or fail your way to success, whichever one you fancy. They're both the same thing. I live by that method, and that's how I made this. And the bigger thing I wanted to do on this was the actuating system. So Roy uses a different actuating system. I wanted a more sophisticated one with a pin system that was spring loaded. That way it wouldn't accidentally actuate down, like going down the lake with motor vibration or wave shutter or whatever. I ended up doing this with a pipe of 1/8 inch Schedule 40 and then a solid aluminum stock ends from the hole saw. I just used those and welded those in, and then I kind of ported those out with a step-up bit. Then I got a spring from an RC car. And UHNW plastic is a huge part of how the anchors work and how this system works. And, I mean, they pretty much act as bearings and bushings to allow stuff to slide up and down pretty seamlessly. Once I had the one version kind of working, I welded it to the first anchor with the same stuff. That's like 1/8 inch 1x2. I replicated the design to both sides, and I'm super happy with this anchor system. So happy, I wished I had put it on other boats instead of this one. But hey, ideas come when they come. And I also tied up everything else. We added in our first generation graph mounts to the front. We modified that so it would fit right there next to the trolling motor mount. But there's one thing I also really wanted to do to this boat. I want pan optics pretty bad, because some of these smaller lakes I fish are mud and you can't see anything. So I was thinking I would make my own manual turret. I've seen these electric turrets, not a fan. And I'm thinking I can make a manual one by kind of replicating what an electric turret does, but with a kayak rudder system that controls the turret. Just slightly turns it. Doesn't have to be a 360 turn. It's mainly just going to keep it straight while I'm moving the trolling motor one way, but it's still going to be attached to the trolling motor. If I need it slightly turned to the right or the left, I mean, the kayak rudder system will just turn it slightly to the right or the left. If I'm pacing a bank, down the left or the right. I mean, you can just angle it that way, and you'll see everything ahead of you. You won't be able to see the fish if it turns, but I don't particularly care. Something is better than nothing, and I definitely don't want to overcomplicate this boat any more than it already is with something that's going to be obscenely loud and noisy and doesn't really turn very fast to follow the fish anyways. And I won't have a whole lot of leverage to be up there that close to the front and, kind of turn it like how you would do on a bigger bass boat where they have those manual turret holders that you can just kind of flip at will. I'm going to need something to attach to this edge. Make something that'll make this edge worthwhile having. I did a lot of crap to have this Minn Kota edge, so I might as well make it worthwhile. So this is actually working pretty well. I tried to put a perspective mount on it. It did not support the perspective mount very well, so I had to put it back on the traditional mount. Then later on I cut it in half and stuck another piece of Schedule 40 in there, so there's 2 tubes right there, and that's to run the wire cleanly so it's not wrapped around the shaft all stupid like. I hated that with all the other designs, so I got rid of it with this design. Then I ran all the lines and the housing with split sleeve, ran it through a trolling motor jacket and hit it all. And well, there it is. Hey guys, if you want to take on a project like this with us, we have full master classes that you can just check out right on this channel. Also, with raw boat documentaries on the top builds I've ever done. You can access these on YouTube directly or through patreon.com and choose your tier. Or if you don't have any time for any of that stuff, we also have shops out of Georgia and out of Illinois, a professional team that can do these things for you. Contact information for both stores is in the description below. Just check it out right there in the video. Now back to the actual boat. If you think I took on the front and the back the way I did just to dare to be great and take on huge challenges, that would be a lie. The real challenge is the boat. So I got to a point to where I knew it was going to be terribly complicated, and then I just found other things to do until I couldn't do anything else. Now I'm here. The lockers in this boat are what's going to separate it from any other plastic build out there, and there are quite a few, and some of them are very advanced. To try and take lead, we were going to have to do things that nobody else has done, and it's going to have to actually work. Without the lockers, this boat is just a really fancy looking plastic boat. It's a gimmick. And there are already a number of plastic boat gimmicks out there. I mean, join the crowd. This will actually give it the leading edge in what it needs to be for a portable watercraft that is capable. The spread will be for 6 rods a piece, but these lockers will be very different. They're almost going to taper more at the bottom because of the boat's unique design. It's going to actually allow for more space where it's really hard to get space in a jump boat because of the tapering sides. We're going to be carrying on a patron-inspired design, which is to make slits for the rods in the back, which allow you to move rods back and forth between the lockers to get one rod underneath way down at the bottom out to the top without having to take multiple rods out. The system works flawlessly, and I've integrated this into several builds since its debut. Normally I would either run 2 aluminum or plywood sheets for the rod interface, but it's cramped in there and I'm out of options to actually fasten that in, so I took this route with foam. Tried to make a foam second interface to lock the rods in, and I used gap filler to gap in all the seams so that the pour foam wouldn't bleed out. Gap filler by itself is not suitable for flotation, but to fill gaps it's wonderful. I go ahead and I tie the back interfaces all together in the back, making all the units one. Then we test the system to see how well it will work. The pairs of the system will hold 8-foot rods rather well. 3 of them actually per locker. The one thing that I did not foresee is how high those rod tubes actually sat, and they actually sat on top of the front of the boat. That kind of caused me a few problems. I didn't really foresee that. I thought it was all going to fit underneath. So those top rods are sitting right there on top of the front deck, where there used to be a front deck, underneath the new front deck. It's no secret that we're huge fans of EVA foam. We've become bigger fans the more we use it. The most robust stuff that is extremely durable and just awesome looking is HydroTurf. Now this is actually our house brand color. This is TB Nation Camo. You cannot get this anywhere else. And the color was picked by popular demand of the audience who pushed for it, wanting a camo that had gray in it with no yellow or brown. Let's take a quicker look at some of these things before we get too far in. See how we attach those with rivet and rivet washers on the back? Every place that you attach aluminum to the plastic, you want to do it pretty tight. Remember, that's the only thing bonding your frame to the hull is those rivets, nothing else. And also, let's check out the bilge systems. We were doing a quad bilge setup. I was only going to run 1 bilge in each pontoon. I'm kind of paranoid. I'm running 2. A manual and an automatic bilge, pretty much primary and auxiliary bilges, just in case one fails, because that's the only thing you can actually really do to save your boat in the event of a pontoon failure. And in addition, we have also ran all the wires back to the battery compartment, including for the trolling motor and for any of the advanced fish finders and accessories that need to run off their own separate battery. Now back to the rod locker. Things are going pretty well, but there's still one thing we have to do. To solidify those rod tubes in there and to add some flotation, we need to do some pour foam right in that little pocket. So between these spots where we have the foam interfaces, we go ahead and add some foam. Oh crap. That is a lot more than I thought it was going to be. Oh shit. Go back in there. No, go. This is a catastrophe. Oh. Okay, go in there. You're going to go somewhere. I poured a lot of foam in my life and I still mess it up almost like every time, at least once. I don't know what to say about it. But generally after the first fail, I get everything else right. So at least I got that. Just to let you guys know, we're all over Facebook. We have one of the biggest groups out there, and we also have a really good page that has good customer service. You need to contact us for anything. Check us out. We have now done everything crucial on the bottom end to be to this point where we can now start to attach the lids and make the paneling. This could be done a number of different ways. Cardboard, construction paper from the dollar store. In this case, we're using Graphics Duralar. It's a plastic film that doesn't crinkle, and it's really good for templates. Mainly because you can see right through it and you can get all your lines perfectly without having to do a bunch of extra stuff. And you just put it right on the aluminum panel and trace it and cut it, and there it is. We had these hatches custom coated that Everlast green, and against the turf we're going to use on the top, I thought it would work well, but then I thought maybe not. If we two-tone accent it black and green, so we repainted the part of the hatch that will accent against the turf. We also finished the part of the back frame right there against the transom that solidified and matched it with the frame. Then we move on to the subfloor, where we have pink foam that we had to maybe trim a little bit because of how the plastic floor tapered, but then we stuck it right in there, and that'll give it max rigidity. Since we are using 050 sheeting in there, which is pretty thin. For non-low bearing sidewalls, you can use 0.040 or even go down to 0.025, which is almost paper thin, and it works really well for sidewalls, especially if there's foam backing it. But for subfloor or anything low bearing, I think 0.050 is the bare minimum. Oh yeah, I completely forgot where I'm going to run my electronics and my switch panel. I knew I would get to it, but I guess here is a good place. We're going to just make a vertical wall that holds both the switch panel and the fuse block right next to each other. It's all part of a greater, bolder strategy. You'll have to see after we're done with the deck. My affiliates and I have almost steered away from carpet completely unless somebody requests it, but we always try to steer people towards EVA foam because certain types of EVA foam, like this Gator Cam HydroTurf, rival carpet in toughness and longevity and have way better qualities overall, including aesthetics. And then also custom turf jobs have trended tremendously throughout the fishing industry, and both our shops now are outfitted with people who can professionally scan and get these made however you'd want them. You want a complete custom deck made out of EVA foam? We'll do it. We'll install it for you. And here are some examples of it. But we can also just do it ourselves. If you have good routing skills, you can make basic designs in flat turf that's non-line that we sell through Orthodeck on our site. And you can get a custom routed job for about 1/10 the cost of what it would cost somebody to scan and make turf specifically for you. So we're going to show you how to do that. The bits, the techniques, all the stuff, so you can do it yourself if you want. My lineup of what I use for routing the turf, which is, I mean, you only need one of these, but I have two because I'm eccentric. So these are flat bits. That's what people told me it's called. I actually don't know what they're called. I'm not a professional carpenter. So I have different size flat bits. I think that's 1/4 or 3/8. This is 1/2 inch flat bit. Then I have some that are a 3/4 inch flat bit. And actually see that big giant circle? If you divot that one all the way down to the very, very bottom layer, but just underneath it, it'll actually give you a perfect circle, like an eyeball. Some of the ones that are big and flat will do that. For the edges, I use these. And sometimes the smaller one is better. Sometimes if you want a bigger line, the bigger one's better. I don't know what these are called. I just know that is exactly what they look like. That is exactly what they are. And I have other ones, but these don't work. I just have them here for in case I need to actually route wood or something, but specifically those would actually start cutting into the hatch. It's these. It's those that just do the taper right from the bearing. The bearing rolls on the hatch, and right above it, you have your foam layer, and it cuts right a perfect bevel right into the foam layer. It takes off that little layer so you can see the two-tone accent. I have tried other ones, but the bladed ones actually leave a lot of strings, and they're not really good for intricate work. I mean, I've tried smaller ones. There's a lot of going back and forth. You have to come route back and forth and hope you don't mess up the line or widen it. For the intricate stuff, I do like the Dremel. This is a Milwaukee Dremel knockoff. And this is the Dremel plunge router attachment that you just lock in one moment with one of the handles. You just twist one of the handles and it locks once you get the correct depth. And these are these diamond bits. I don't know what bit that is, but I don't know what they're actually called, but it's these. Those right there. Those work very, very well for like going in the turf and burning through a line without leaving a bunch of strings. It actually routes the turf really well. I wish that I could get like a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch bit of this. It probably would burn the turf perfectly, but I cannot find them. I actually ordered a set off of Amazon, and that's about the widest I've ever found right there. And some of these will do a better job than others. I find like the flat ones do the best job of burning it. I've tried the tapered ones. Honestly, they do okay. But they start causing you little problems, a little bit of stringing issues, and so I really just like the flat ones. And I never really tried the bevel ones; those probably would do well too. I mean, you could just get a set of these on Amazon. I don't know what they're called, but you look up like Dremel bits, they'll come up. Also, if you do have stringy edges, there's 2 ways you can go. You can get tweezers. Well, you need tweezers, period, because there's just going to be sections that you're not going to be able to get very well. You're going to have to pull them out with tweezers. The other section for long sections, and sometimes when you can't get the line just perfect, you can burn, and you can kind of burn the edges, remelt it very, very, very carefully. I like this Milwaukee one. It happens to be the best option. I've tried other ones. I've tried, corded soldering irons. They burn too hot. It's too easy to screw up the foam. This one, if you just put like a regular 2 amp hour battery in there, if it's not like a fuel battery, it gives you a really good burn that's not so hot, but just enough to kind of melt the edges. And sometimes even after doing that, it won't melt them completely. And that's when you go in there with the stuff and kind of just pick it out. And then you get pretty clean lines with that. My last turf job with just these tools was exceptionally good. Very good, in so much that, despite some of the human error that I had going on from experimentation, if I could do it all over again, I mean, that job looks just as good as any other professional job. I mean, minus the 3-tone foam stuff and some of that, like the CDEC HD stuff, which is unbeatable. You do a really good job. Your boat would be the talk of the dock. Everybody would stop to look at it, for sure. This is, there's a few of these out there with like this gray and green, and it just looks so freaking good. The black and green looks even very good, but it's very much like a TV Nation thing, like how we do it, the black and green. You see that, black and green? My truck's supposed to be black and green, but I thought orange would look better on my truck, and that kind of just should have got black and green. And then finally just having the guts to do the turf like this out of the sheet. Alright, so before you even lay that flat, non-routed teak turf, know that any imperfection in your deck on top will just, it'll be shown dramatically by the turf. The turf will show every little imperfection. So make sure your deck is completely flat. If you have like low spots or weird things, or things happen to your top of your deck, like how this one did, do your best to absolutely level it out. Right now I'm trying to level it out by welding in some of the spots in the divots and trying to level it out, because this whole experiment that I did with different types of sheet metal didn't work terribly well. If you're using Nate's hatches, just get 090 sheeting and just match it on top of the framing, so it all just levels out and you don't have these problems. If you have gaps between the hatches, you need to fill that with like bonded resin or some sort of fairing compound or epoxy, and you can get that all in. And then just make sure you refine it, sand it, orbital sand it, whatever you got to do. Go in there with a die grinder. Just get it as flawless as possible before you lay down the turf. You don't want to do all this stuff and route it and do all this work and then just like put it on the deck, and then you see all these shadows that shift and show in the light. You won't see it until you're in the sunlight, and you'll be like, oh man, what did I just do? This time we're going to try a different approach to the entire thing. We're going to try and route this turf before we even stick it to the deck. All the other times we stuck it right to the deck, or we stuck it right to the series of hatches and panels that made up the deck, so we were able to get away with it. And the Prowler 8, we had no edges, we had no gunnels, no anything, so we could just route it right there with pretty much no consequence. We got away with it. And in these certain situations, if you have this privilege, then go ahead and take it. But we don't have that luxury this time. So in unique situations like this, you could do one of two things. You could cut the turf into pieces, customize them, and then fit them right to your deck. This would be a more complicated way, but it is the way that everybody else does it professionally. They're just a bunch of pieces that stick together and they look like one nice piece. It's not. It's just a series of pieces, and that is what we're kind of going to do, just not in the same way. We're actually going to route this whole sheet, but we're going to cut it to fit in the front. We're going to keep it floating. We're going to route on top of it to make sure we like it, because if you do stick the orthodeck onto whatever surface you want, it stays there and it will not come off. I swear, you have like 1 minute second to shift it if it gets stuck, and then it just stays there. And knowing that, I'm not going to pull that plastic off the bottom until I'm absolutely certain that I like how this is laid out. And you can do anything. Really, if you just want to accent the sides, it looks nice just like that without any intricate lines in the middle. If you want to just do straight lines, that's fine too. We did that on the Yak Killer here. It turned out pretty phenomenal. Then we got real bold with the Prowler 8. And this is where I kind of really saw the potential of what you could really do with it. That's when I actually implemented the Dremel with that bit. And I found out that it actually did these intricate little lines here. Much better, and there was less stringy little edges, and you could just, it wasn't a whole lot of mess, and you could burn that out, and you could really get super deep and intricate with that. Use different type of diamond coated bits. I mean, you just make your own little design. And I really only show this, I know a lot of people aren't even going to do this, that this is a little eccentric. A lot of people, I mean, don't want to do this because they don't have the patience or whatever, but like, as far as, I'm just showing this for you to actually see the actual like potential of Orthodeck, what can actually be achieved on it. And it's pretty substantial. Pretty much anything that can be achieved in professional foam layouts can be achieved on Orthodeck because it actually is professional foam. It's not 3-layer foam. 3-layer foam is something else, and that's what really truly looks nice. But you can kind of get a 3-layer effect if you kind of ghost it in there. You kind of do a ghosting of just the top layer, and then you go into the bottom layer, which is whatever color of the two-tone you get. And so you can kind of get a 3-color aspect that way. We're going to do those same principles here in this one. To find out where like we're going to be guiding this, how far and how close the lines need to be, you do need to kind of cut out some openings. I felt pretty safe cutting right on the edge of the trolling motor like pedal insert because the trolling motor tray overlaps over that. I don't have to actually route that. For the hatches that I cut out right there and are going to continue to cut out, I wish I would have cut those out real like loose inside. That way there was an overhanging gap just as a margin for error, just in case the foam shifts whenever you do install this massive sheet on. I did have to struggle with a little bit of that, and there were some imperfections from cutting it so close thinking I could line it up perfectly afterwards. Now I wish I would have left myself some room for error there and cut it inward more and left an overhanging gap on each side, just FYI. Also, when you get the Orthodeck and you open it up, it comes in rolled, so it's formed that way. So when you try to flatten it out, it's going to try and fight you. So you need to flatten it out, put stuff on top of it to kind of layer it out and flatten out. Eventually it'll kind of flatten out, and then the bottom, sometimes it crinkles, and that'll cause you problems with like flattening it out and then actually having uneven surfaces when you're trying to route it. So go underneath there and just slice the crinkled stuff out with a utility knife and flatten it back out. Just the creases, and just uncrease them, flatten them out, and then that way your stuff that you can work on is a flat, and you have a flat workspace, and you can just do it like this. That's how I achieved this. So I pretty much got a verbatim cut, and now I'm going in on my actual design. I just freehanded this. I saw a few really crazy custom turf jobs. I don't know if you follow Ben LaGrange from Southern Cooler Co. on Instagram. He posts the most insane turf jobs I've ever seen. Like, they completely destroy everybody else's. He's like probably the best out there, truthfully. And so I saw like he did like a cryptic design in a turf job for some like flat skiff or bay boat or something, and I was like, that's so sick. And I don't want to copy the cryptic design. Not really sure I could replicate it completely, but since it's a 3-layered and this is 2, but I just kind of made my own little tribal design of something I had in my head to kind of make. I used to do stuff like this way back in the day. Like when I was like young and all I could do was like bored on the ship and all I did was draw and do stuff. So I'm kind of bringing some of that back. This is my own little style. I really strongly urge you to do something like this if you can, just for the fun of it. I've seen people do topography and layered maps and kind of cool stuff, 3D map layers inside the turf. It looks really cool. A lot of people have gotten very creative, put their custom logo, their company logo, their own custom finish, their wife's name, their family's name, their kids' names. And you can just do a lot inside of it. And just remember you have that two-tone option just to kind of ghost it in to the main turf, which will change the look completely. Speaking of the look, the grain matters. In the light, it matters. When you look down one end, if light's facing right on it, you should look at one end and one end goes flat, and you go ahead and you turn around and you look down the other way, like up and down. So up it should look flat and down it should look really sharp. you'll see the turf become really sharp. You'll see all the lines very pronounced, and then you'll look the other way, forward or back, however you want to, and it goes flat. You want to make sure all your pieces line up like that before you stick them on hatches. And if you don't do that, like, it'll immediately show in the sun, and it might not matter to you, but everybody and their mother will point it out to you that you didn't line the turf up right, or you lined it backwards. They'll do it to you on carpet. That's why it's really important to have like extra layers. That way you're not forced or pressured to use like this convenient sized piece of turf that will fit a piece that you need it to fit on. But it's the grain's the wrong way, but it's all you have, so you use it, and then it's like stuck like that forever. I have like 5 sheets, and it took almost 3 to do this whole boat. And having extra sheets will save your project and give you the courage to try both stuff like we have done here. To install it, leave most of the tape on, cut a little 1-inch safety strip right at the very front where you're going to start placing it, and you tack it to the deck, just with that little piece. And then if it's lined up, then you can start taking a little by little off all of the white, backing tape. Take it all off and expose, the adhesive, and just slowly go from front to back and layer it all down. Also for the back, because look at the back. Caused me all kinds of problems. I ended up using Graphics Duralard, the same stuff I used to make the panels for the boat around the hatches. I used to template this for foam. So when it traced it, cut it out, then traced it on the back of it, and then cut it out. And that worked really well for this. I had absolutely no other solution on how I was going to pull that off. Once it's on the deck, just be very careful and take a utility knife and cut out right on the edge, and you'll get straight edges, perfect edges. Always make sure your blades are incredibly sharp, because for whatever reason this foam just dulls blades like you wouldn't believe. I have no idea, because it's foam, but it does. And if you force the blade and you cut too deep into a corner, it will show forever. So just be very careful about that, and just use that contouring bit that we talked about in the very beginning and go over each corner. If you're using Nate's dry hatches, you're going to have to detach the hatches from the track frames, the hatches and the hinges themselves. You're going to take them all off. Take it off with a 3/16 inch drill bit. You drill out those 3/16 inch rivets. You got to just rivet it all back together when you're done. Make sure you don't mix up the hinges. Keep the hinges labeled for each hatch, or that will cause you problems. Also, if you're having to put 2 pieces together, do not stretch these pieces. Lay them on completely over, and lay them one on top of the other and cut right over on top of each other, and that will give a perfect line. Otherwise, you see that big gross gap there? That happened because I ended up stretching the foam toward the line, and it ended up shrinking. So just overlap the foam and cut it. Then reach underneath, pull the top and bottom cut pieces out, and then that will leave you a perfect cut piece, and the foam will butt together right the best. It's not going to look perfect, but it is the best option you have, unless you're going to try and do something trendy like make lines right inside the cut groove where you have to joint them. You can also do that as well. For the hatch, it's the same thing. Use the contouring bit, go around them carefully, go back and forth at least once to go back and make sure all strings off the edges are gone. If you're using those bladed flat bits, know that dragging it one way will cut better than dragging it the other way. You just got to find that way and use it consistently, and then you can probably get away with just one drag. But I always found going back and forth each time just gives you a much cleaner, more professional looking line that you have to doctor up less later. You'll need a specific platform like this, I don't know, utility bench I bought from Lowe's or whatever. It has spots right there where you can stick clamps in there and clamp down the hatches, or clamp down pieces of tubing or angle or something that you can get a straight line for the router to follow. That way it doesn't jar or bend your straight line. So when you're making those gigantic straight lines all the way down like that, you see that I have that piece of tubing there. It's 2 inches away from the line. There's a marker on that specific router. It gives you 2 inches of the line. And then obviously I just templated and drew that in this whole big bump board. I just took a meter stick and lined it verbatim. It's not gonna be perfect. It'll be 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters off. It's probably not gonna jive for a professional tourney, but in terms of catch photo release pictures, it's gonna be pretty accurate. And it's extremely convenient to have on board. It's right there. You can use it, then toss the fish right back in the water. And you can put them anywhere. Like this deck right now, I finished this boat super quick. I wanted to get more creative with it, but I was actually pretty scared as I had bought less sheets of this. I didn't think I had any extra sheets, so if I messed this up, it was done. So I just went conservative on this one. But we totally went all out on the Prowler 10, which is the most intricate. Know that you're gonna find other cheaper versions of like the two-tone non-routed foam on Amazon, but you do get what you pay for, because that was my actual first investment into doing a DIY foam job, because it was minimal risk financially. And all I want to tell you is that you get what you pay for in foam. Whatever you think you're saving for in the beginning, you waste it in the long end. This Orthodex stuff is supreme quality foam. It works very good for decks and everything. I would never leave this out in the sun though. Make sure if you're gonna leave it out in the sun, have a nice ample cover with supports so the cover doesn't actually touch the foam, and just do what you can to preserve it, because it will cause you problems if you don't. The foam doesn't really retain water at all. That's a really nice aspect about it. I get a lot of questions of how dirty does it get. It does get dirty pretty quickly if you're not careful, but I mean, I'm not wearing my shoes on this. For one, that's the reason I have foam, is so in the hot summer days I don't need shoes, because the deck won't burn my feet. And if you want to wear your shoes, just make sure they're clean. That it does get dirty, but it does also clean off really easy. The only thing I've never seen it clean off, I got potato chip grease on it one time and left it there, and it stained the turf. That's the only stuff that I've ever seen stain the turf. Potato chip grease and like fish attractant spray, and nothing else has stained it. Also with these designs, whether you freehand or use a stencil, I just use a regular pen, and you can take off the ink with rubbing alcohol and it will take it right off without damaging the foam. So you always have that option to restart. Now let's get into this and let's just finish it. I don't really know if you could tell by how I pieced this video together, but this boat was actually a mind bender. And I mean, I did to myself. I did the front, the anchors, the pedestal mount, the edge, the foot pedal. I complicated this boat tremendously, but the last front Prowler, I had really good results and it only took a week. So if you follow the base design and you just keep it simple, like how the boat's meant to be, but you make some of these things awesome, then it shouldn't take you that long. I mean, we're pretty good here. We tied a lot of stuff into this boat, tremendously, like a lot. But the one thing we have not done is tie together all the wiring. We've run conduits for it. We've even made space and voids for it. So now let's do it. We stuck a Panoptix right there underneath the foot pedal, and we seamlessly kind of hid that all with wire loom. And we sell electrical kits, just like this TV Nation Weekend Warrior electric kit, meant specifically for small boats. It comes with an awesome switch panel and gauges, port to charge your phone, switch panel, wiring, everything you need. You kind of put it all in there pretty seamlessly, and this is actually a small little void there. That like 6 to 8 inch void behind the last panel in the core there is all where the wiring is, and it kind of just gets pushed back, and then we have a drop-in liner that drops right into the hatch that exact size. I had them modified here though. This was like 7.5, where I think the initial ones that are meant for the regular boats are 9.5. So you would have to modify them or just wait till we produce them at 7.5 if there's a big enough demand for the drop-in liners. But I really couldn't have pulled off the storage without the drop-in liners, because inside there is just chaos. It's just wiring and plastic. I mean, the drop-in liners are just money. Even with everything we added, like room for tackle is still missing, but we make these drop-in like vertical tackle storage, and I love them. This is actually the shorter one that fits in a shorter area like this, and then we have a standard one that'll fit a 3700 series tackle box. Another one is right on the side of the right rod locker between the main core. We made a spot for that bump board. See that bump board? It disappeared because we made a little spot there in between the vertical day box and the corner caddy, and that little spot there for the bump board. We have all the major components to really have good quality of fishing on the water in a watercraft as small as this. But let's prove it. Let's see what it can do on the water. So I made this anchor platform. Just kind of fits on. I just made it last minute real quick last night with like bumper busters that, you know, the trolling motor mounts just kind of hit on the deck. Made that and grounded it here. And that's how I traveled about it with tie downs over it. Just rigged them up. So it's floating pretty darn good in the water just initially. So there, for all those of you who wondered if it was going to sink, it has not sunk yet. I'm pretty happy with how it floats in the water. It has an abysmal draft of, I think, 2 or 3 inches max when I'm not in there. When I'm in there, it goes down, obviously you can tell, quite a bit. And when I'm in the very back with the motor on, then that's the closest it ever goes down. We're about 4 or 5 inches above the waterline where the lip is that, you know, seams the boat together. That seam is hanging about that far out of the water. So a lot of it is in the water. A lot of the black, it goes from a 3-inch draft to like no draft. But that's like with me motoring and I'm out there. Other than that, the boat feels fine. It doesn't wane. I'm there in the very edge. There is a little bit of a lean, but it's a 42-inch beam. It's pretty generous. What I was more paranoid about was like flexing and oddness, because of how I did the Prowler 8, the subfloor, it flexed and it made all kinds of noise. You could tell like the wood was flexing on the plastic, and it just was loud. And stealth is extremely important to me. That's like, I don't know what your view on fishing is, but to me, stealth is everything. So a quiet boat, I mean, the Minn Kota Edge is about as quiet of a trolling motor as I'm gonna get. That Spirit back there is about as quiet of an electric an outboard you're going to get. The anchors are manual. They make no sounds. No loud linear actuators. I mean, the turret is manual. It makes no noise, barely. So right now I'm looking at a very stealthy watercraft that I can walk up and down like an actual boat. It stores all my rods, all my gear. It doesn't store as much gear as a Yak Killer, but the rod storage is probably actually better because of how they sit in there. We get some small wins over the Yak Killer. More portable, not near as much storage. It is more stable though, that's for sure. So we got a win there. With the 1232 John boat conversion, it was stable once you got used to it. It was kind of like the kayaker's lie. When you get in a kayak and they're like, oh, it's super, super stable. It's not really that stable. Like you got used to it. And so then now you think it's stable, and then you get used to the platform. So anything that's better than that is maybe more stable. We got used to the 1232 John boat being what it was. And truth be told, that Prowler 8 was more stable than it. And that was an 8-foot boat. That's really the bigger thing, was that. But in terms of everything loaded in here, for the John boat, we had gear storage for days, 2-day boxes, a whole terminal store you can stick your life jacket and anchor and all your wet stuff, your wet shoes in. Then we still had room for the battery compartment and the switch panel and 2 big rod lockers. So as far as storage goes, you ain't gonna beat no boat like that. I think the closest we could have probably got to is we found like a low 1040. Can't find one of those out here to save my life. So the closest we're gonna get to that is this like 1042 plastic boat. The EPropulsion obviously is an external add-on, but I do love this motor exponentially. It is expensive compared to its gas counterparts, but in terms of like a speed test or performance test, the gas outboards cannot beat it or go faster than it. It goes just as fast as they do from the 2.5 to 6 horsepower range. The bigger thing though is just no maintenance at all. Like no impellers, don't have to worry about cold starts, carb issues, float issues, spark plug issues, elevation issues, long-term storage, whatever that does to a motor. Having to constantly maintain it. If you're busy in life and you have a lot to maintain and the last thing you want to worry about is whether or not this motor's going to start when you plan like a camping trip, then you know this thing is pretty good. As I store this thing in a bag, the bag you saw me take it out of and put it on here, it goes back in there and it stays in there, and it comes out and gets charged for a few hours, and then it's ready to go for the whole weekend, or I mean for however long you want to do it. You can recharge it, get solar panels, whatever you want to do for it. I would just take the battery pack off right there and just charge it at the campsite between long trips out in the lake. And that really is all it. It's just that. Like for a trolling motor, you got to rig a battery somewhere. That battery is right on top of that. And it's only about 50 pounds, the whole motor, 45 pounds, something. It's really comparable to a small, portable, like short shaft or long shaft outboard motor. And that specifically makes it worth it for me, because without that, then I may have not gotten it. Because there's some other ones out there, but they require batteries. And I was like, well, then I'll just run a trolling motor. I mean, I'll eat the last 2 miles an hour or whatever. I mean, it doesn't go much faster. It goes about 30 to 40% faster than a trolling motor if you were to get that. Most people say that 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour extra is just really not enough to do it for them. But I'll tell you, at 30% throttle of this thing, it reaches what a trolling motor would maybe make at 100% throttle. So, and it's brushless. So its chances of going out or getting ruined over time, it's just not a big deal. It's perfect motor for the boat, any boat this size. Strength to weight ratio of the motor in conjunction with no need for maintenance, the portability, the long-term storage, the set it and forget it, the ease of use, it's all worth it to me. That's why I have it. This is it. I think it's dope. Look at it. It's fishing like a boss. It's really stable, guys. It's extremely stable. I don't know what the whole thing was with that. Everybody saying, you know, they weren't sure if it was going to sink or how it was going to ride. It was going to be too flippy. I don't know if you've ever been in a kayak, like even a very capable kayak. This thing destroys that. This thing has, and it stores like all my stuff, like all my rods, all my overflow rods, life jacket, net, waterproof boxes that hold all my valuables. They're all in there. You know the major store for like the rods, and then my main rod locker is here. That stores all my valuables. The other rod lockers are here on deck. I mean, the other rods I'm using are here on deck, and they got the little rod buckles that hook right there, right next to the T-tracks. Got the manual turret, and that works. Yes, it does. Gets a little bit of an angle. Just if I'm hitting a bank, it just tweaks it just that much, or I'm hitting this way, it just tweaks that way, or just mainly it just goes straight. I just wanted to go straight in front of the boat mainly. That's all, with slight tweaks, and that's exactly what it does. That setup worked out really well. The only thing I would change on this boat is I got a 42-inch shaft and you need a 36-inch shaft. Truly need a 36-inch shaft, so I'll have to modify the turret to be shorter for that. But the turret by itself is very conservative, very slick, out of the way, and you don't really even notice it because it's on the trolling motor. Pretty quiet. I got these ultralight lids. They flex a little more than the 1/8-inch lids. I kind of wish I just got the 1/8-inch lids, but these are lighter, and so I don't really know how that would affect the overall performance. But I would say that, I don't know, we're well under the weight capacity. Just me, full load of gear, these anchors, that motor, the EPropulsion pushes this boat about as well as it's going to get pushed. It's very nice and quiet. We're turning the boat. The anchor is actually holding this really well. I just needed to turn it. There. I'm going to drop the other one right now. We ain't ever going to move. How easy are they to pull up? Well, let's check it out. In. That was that easy. And then out again. Like super, like that fast. That fast, in and off. In, locked, out, fast. And this is just the prototype version. Once we actually get a good running version, it'll probably be better. So let's pull these both up back in a little bit more, and I would like to actually get off and see what I can do here. Perfect. Like, there is no movement. They hold that boat so good that if you don't watch it, the sheer amount of force from these holding the boat will just like jerk you right off the boat. Since we're over here, let's go ahead and just drop these anchors down and let's do an on and off the water test and let's see how that goes. Where, you know, how easy is it to get on and off this thing if you fall off of it? Well, it barely sunk right there. So, I mean, if it's that easy to get off, then it will probably be very easy to get back on. And so since we're out here, the water's freezing cold, but let's go get some pictures and let's go get a view of it, what it looks like. Maybe we'll get some waves. Yep, there's some waves. And you can actually see how the anchors flex. A lot of people are like, oh, it won't dig, so it won't hold. No, it does hold. It doesn't need to dig because it rises and collapses and moves back and forth with the boat to keep it pinned, which is friggin' awesome. In fact, if these actually had motors that dug into and the water like moves in a wave, that actually puts a lot more stress on the anchors and the boat hull itself because there's no displacement from the water to keep it right. That's actually probably really bad for a plastic boat. I don't want to deal with that. That's why Roy's anchors are so popular with people out there. Yeah, there are those micro anchors, but you know, they bind when there's extreme pressure against the boat. You actually have to go there and help the plastic motors to get them unstuck a lot. There are ones with linear actuators, but they're loud and you get all the problems that come with linear actuated anchors, which we have made before. And the hydraulic ones, I'm not sticking a hydraulic unit on this boat. It's small. Let me look at it. There is gracefulness and elegance and simplicity of design. And as far as it goes for getting back on the boat, yeah, that was pretty easy. I mean, obviously I did it from shore. I'm not going to jump in that water. It's freezing, but it was pretty easy to get on that thing, like out there. Off the shore, just FYI. There's never been a time when I had these manual anchors, Roy's or mine, and I was like, man, I wish I would have got a hydraulic or electric. Alright guys, I have the motor powered up here to just kind of get current. Like simulate current, like if we were in a river, it would kind of be like this. It's cavitating, it's hilarious. Like, so these anchors, the chassis, everything that we did, holding this boat like a G. So that means, I mean, when I go into high river currents or like high wind situations, I'm not really worried. I'm super not worried. No flex, none. Now this is a small boat. It weighs under 300 pounds, the whole thing, probably 270. 260-ish, fully rigged right now, and obviously another with me. It's right under 4. It's like 480 pounds, maybe a little more, like right at 480 or 500. Like we're probably almost right at capacity for the boat. And these anchors, These anchors are holding quite well. You wanna know what my favorite mod is on here? This day box. These like vertical day storage or tackle storage that we have. Vertical day box specifically on our website. If you check it out, there is the best thing ever. I can't believe I didn't think about this sooner. Thank you Nate for producing this, and definitely a collaboration that is worthwhile. This is an awesome item to get. Get it immediately. I would say hands down, hardest boat I've ever had to build, which is surprising because it's only 10 feet. It's not like I had to crawl in and out of it a million times. It didn't take up a bunch of room. But I tell you, having to make that aluminum hull bind to the plastic and keep it all straight and then add all those things in, it wasn't just one idea that I saw from start to finish. It was a series of ideas that ended up being this, and I'm pretty happy with this. Normally I pick apart all my flaws, but I think this is actually as good as it could be, truly. At least at this point in time in my skill level, which I will honestly pray to be better. There's the trailer mods. I made that earlier, yesterday. Just a 4x8 sheet of plywood, 2 2x6s, and we turfed over it. That's like the best bunk ever. Way better than bunk carpet or even like 20-ounce carpet. Turf is awesome for bunks. The front is just meant to kind of catch the thing as it slides up, if it even goes that far, which generally it probably won't. It's just merely meant to sit on the plywood. All right, let's go see if there's any water in the tunes, because the boat had an exceptionally shallow draft, and when I looked in there, I didn't even see a hint of water in the locker, which is where I thought I would see it. I wonder what I did there. What scraped there? Must have been, Okay, so bone dry. If there is water in there, it's down here in the one part, and it's not high enough to even actually go out of the plug. That plug was a little loose. No water. Interesting. I wonder what that scrape came from. I don't think of anything that did that. Maybe some of that's just stuff factory. I don't know. Yeah, the scratches bother me. The frailness of plastic bothers me. It's not as robust as aluminum. But the big thing is, if it does fail, welding like a patch in a plastic hull is pretty easy. It might look not great, but it's easy. Like, you can repair this. Have you ever seen like rental kayaks from like a lake? There's patches all over the place for when somebody messed it up, and there's just still going. So like a soldering iron or a heat gun or a wood burner gun will just like fix a lot of things. You'd be surprised. Loadup was kind of tedious, not because it was hard to get the boat on the trailer, but just because of all the extra steps with dropping the anchors and pulling them down and getting them ready for travel. That is whatever it is. But other than that, the boat is pretty caked to load up on the trailer. All right, guys, that's a wrap. It's done. It is ready to go in there. Did I build this boat as a gimmick for clickbait? No, that's just an added bonus that it might potentially trend like clickbait. But I built it because I thought it could do what no other 10-foot boat its size could do. And that is give me everything it gave me, store all the stuff like how I did, utilize the pontoons the way I did, and make all that storage in there, fold the anchors over, and make it as portable as possible to stick inside a toy hauler, which is my main reason for making it. I get a lot of flack from people saying for all the money I spent building this thing, I could have just got a used bass boat or a Tracker Pro 170 or something. You can't stick a Tracker Pro 170 in a toy hauler. Like, I like to have it all when I go camping. I'm sorry. Like, I like to have the mobile hotel and the boat. All right? Otherwise, you got to have like 2 trucks or another person you're going to go camping with, and then they have to tow your boat. I mean, you can make it work, but man, I can go out to the mountains in the most remote places with the crappiest ramps, no ramp, whatever. I'll shove this thing right in there. It's awesome. It's completely out of the way. I mean, I got to remod this now because this is modified for my other trailer setup, but whatever. One problem at a time, guys. Thank you.